service, law firm. We're a medium-sized firm that have been around the Manchester scene for nearly 250 years. We've seen so many amazing Manchester events come and go, and we've stayed, and I'd like to think we're playing no small part in the cultural heritage of Manchester.
So put your hands together for Dave Haslam.
I've been DJing since 1984, and obviously I've been writing since I was 2, I guess. When I wrote the book that you had kindly held up earlier, which was came out a couple of years ago, my autobiography, obviously at that point you look back on things and you try and work out how you got where you got, and the first thing that I realised was how much I owed a debt to so many people, particularly people who opened doors for me. You know, Tony Wilson being an obvious example. And as you were saying, as I was writing the book, I thought, why have I always felt at home at clubs and venues where there are events? You know, I'm always putting on events from, you know, the early 80s onwards, gigs, hundreds of them, you know, DJ gigs, parties. And I realised that actually what I was always hoping for was that replication of that moment where all these strangers from all over Manchester and beyond arrive at the door of a venue or a club, and when they cross the threshold, they are brothers and sisters. You know, there was a big plan from the city planners, God bless them, dreamt up in the late 70s, early 80s, how, you know, how to kind of fashion Manchester for the post-industrial age. And their idea was basically to build as many roads out of Manchester as possible so that people could get back to Lim down Princess Parkway, because they thought that the only reason people would come to Manchester would be to work, you know, and they knew that, and they didn't know any other kind of work. So Joy Division rehearsed 75 yards from where we're sat now, in this old warehouse. The video for Liberal Terrace Apart was recorded in that warehouse. And warehouses were perfect rehearsal spaces. The walls were thick. They had big loading doors where you could get your drum kit in and out. And no one lived in Manchester, so you could rehearse 24/7. For me, what was amazing about, and this was a generation before mine, this was the beginnings of Factory Records, Joy Division, Tony Wilson, Buzzcocks, The Fall. That generation, they did change everything, because they not only did they physically move into Manchester, but they also created a new identity for the city. They made it somewhere where people would come to, because there was a new kind of opportunity. We found by 88 we found an audience, and then in a way the golden age started. But I mean, it had been good up till then as well, but that's when everything came together. And in that golden age, I'd look out and there would be 1,200 people. The audience would be dancing with each other like this, yeah? And your handbag would be on the floor, yeah? Or you'd be with your friends, and all your handbags would be in a pile, and all your girly friends would be there, and the men would be like this, like hunting, yeah? It's very rare that music, fashion, behaviour, attitudes, the drug, everything changes, and that's what happened at the end of the 80s. But the thing is, you wouldn't take requests because there weren't any. Because the thing which was different about the Hacienda was that the people who came to the Hacienda wanted to hear new things, different things. When you're putting on events, or you're writing books, or you're doing something like this, at the back of your mind you're thinking, you know, is this the right thing to do? You know, should I be doing this? Is this working? Is this, you know, and you do have a self-critical voice in your head. And standing up to Morrissey was probably the only occasion in my life when I had no voice saying, why are you doing this? I just felt totally vindicated. I mean, as I said earlier, Tony was a very inspiring man he'd grown up in the late 60s, and he'd seen the late 60s change culture. You know, even if it just meant people were growing their hair longer, But it was more than that, and he could see that. And at the end of the 70s, he was fascinated by the Sex Pistols and punk and how that had changed things and how that had challenged things. And he wanted to do something like that, and he wanted to do it in Manchester. In a lot of the stuff that I do now, although you say I'm only in my 50s, I'm in my late 50s. And for example, I think one of the things that people who've reached that point in their careers should be doing is allowing the ladder down to allow other people up, you know, and you know, I feel like my generation's past is the fuel for future generations. You know, we owe it to the younger generations not to say you'll never have it as good as us, but to say here's what we learned, here are the ingredients for you to create your culture. And I think that's what I try and do now. So the work I've done for the Manchester International Festival in recent years is a curatorial role where they give me a budget and a stage, and I fill it full of young bands and young poets and young musicians and give them the kind of opportunities that people like Tony gave me.
Everybody, put your hands together for a truly inspirational speaker. Thank you.